So some the instructions. We'll talk in English, but we speak many languages. I mean, all the languages of the Federation. So feel free to ask also your questions in your language. It's okay for us. So during your session, we will ask you to put the full, your full name plus your organization, which actually none of us did. We are pretty good in example. To mute your microphone. To keep your video on. It's nicer for us if we can see your face. Of course, you can switch it off if you have a low connectivity. If you want to ask some questions, please the Q&A part, not the chat, but the Q&A. But if you want, you can also use the chat as you want. But it would be better if we do all use the same option. You can also raise your hand and we'll give you the floor, of course. If you have any problem, you can ask Louise. She will help us and will be our administrator. For confidentiality statement and data protection, the session will be recorded, so I hope it's fine for you. So you have to commit yourself not to take pictures of the screen, and if the slide are posted on the shared screen, the speaker should inform the participant if they will receive the slides. So that's it. I hope it's fine for you, and I think we're gonna start with the next slide if we manage.
You are muted, Gabriel.
Yeah, I'm muted so that way you don't hear me swear. C'est con comme système. Huh? I cannot move my slides. Here we go.
Yes, it worked.
Okay.
So you have to hit 5 times the key.
So we're gonna talk, as mentioned, we will talk about Moti. Moti is a tool that we created almost 5 years ago with the Volunteering Alliance of the International Federation of Red Crescent and Red Crescent Societies. It's a tool to measure the motivation of volunteers. It's based on science, on the, self-determination theory, which is the theory of motivation. So we found out that it was a very good idea to apply it to the volunteering. It's also a tool that can be used for staff, so not only for volunteers. And we used it around in 10 national societies in all the 5 regions of the Federation. And already around 4,000 participants were part of it. Thank you, Gabriel. It's also a good way to measure not only the volunteer motivation, but the well-being of volunteers and the leadership practices. And not only there, but the leadership practices of their supervisors. So I think that's it. Gabriel, it's moving on. The slides. Could you go one back, please?
Oh, I'm sorry.
We have a problem with the slides. So we are the 3 speakers. I will start to introduce myself, and then I will ask my colleagues to introduce themselves as well. I'm Karine Fleury. I am working in the Swiss Red Cross as head of volunteering and youth. I'm part with Gabriel mainly, but not only. We have a lot of other people coming, like Salam and other people coming from other national society. We're working quite a lot on this Moti tool. Gabriel, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm the one with the fingers that hit the keyboard, and my name is Gabriel, and I'm based in Geneva with the Federation in National Society Development Services. And Salam.
Hi everyone, I'm Salam Salnoum and I'm working with the Lebanese Red Cross as a national volunteering manager.
Okay, so perhaps you know the volunteering policy of the Federation that stipulates something about volunteering motivation. So it makes all national societies and even the Secretariat should make volunteer motivation as an integral part of volunteer management. And we should monitor on a regular basis the level of engagement, motivation, and well-being of our volunteers, and further strengthen evidence-based management practices by taking the necessary action to improve volunteers' motivation And also, we had an indicator of success into this policy, others as well, but the one related to motivation is really, we have to measure the level of engagement and motivation of volunteers as measured by motivational tools over time. So I think Moti is a very good way to measure it. So we give you an insight about it. Why did we start with this question? It's really why do we have problem to retain motivated and to retain volunteers and to keep on motivating them and keep them engaged as volunteers? So I think that's how we started actually with volunteers. So we'll start with this first question. I think Salam shared into the chat, or yes, the Mentimeter instruction. So you can either use the QR code or the code. I will leave you some times, and you can perhaps tell me. I hope it works for you. I hope you manage. Are you all okay? Are you into the Mentimeter?
So you can click on the link or go to Menti and enter this 8 number or scan the QR code.
I think, can you? Yeah, I think most of you are in. It's great. So we move on with the questions.
Okay.
So the first question is, in your opinion, what do volunteers or staff or unstaff need in order to be fully engaged and motivated? So we have nice starting recognition. Motivation, fair onboarding, psychological safety, fun, appreciation, support, trust, communication. I like this one. Integration, fair distribution of work, pleasure, a clear path, sense of belonging, training, freedom. Yeah, you have the basic needs. I think we have them. Huh? Support, community. Do you see others? Good management. I like this one. Knowledge. Rewards. We said it already. Did I forget something? Yeah, I think more are coming. Ooh, connected to people. Did I forget something? Be welcomed. Ooh, it's moving again. I think we can move. I think, Gabriel, you have a nice basis to start with the theory.
Okay, so my turn. I'm sharing my screen.
Yes.
Am
Just
I admitting.
Move to the second slide.
Okay.
That's it.
So thank you for your answers, and we'll provide our own answers based on self-determination theory. But first, a little word on Moti. Since this is about research, we need to talk about data and how we collect data. So Moti is an app that asks automatically about 24 questions on human motivation. And it's a survey, so we collect quantitative data. And the app and the survey are structured around self-determination theory. That means that we use standard questions from this is very late at night, I'm sorry, from self-determination theory. But that's not it. After that, we organize team discussions with the volunteers where we reflect as a team on what these results actually mean. And that's qualitative data. And so what we have is a system where we combine quantitative and qualitative data, we triangulate and we validate the survey data with people's personal experience and interpretation of what it all means for them. So self-determination theory is a theory that was launched about 40 years ago by these two men. And to start, we'll define what we mean by motivation. It's incredibly simple. Motivation is what gets you out of bed. It's the emotions that get you to move and do things. So, somebody who has absolutely no energy to do anything is not motivated, and somebody who's energized and actually does something is motivated. It's as simple as that. So motivation, motion, emotion, it's all part of the same thing. Now, self-determination theory is what we call a macro theory of human motivation. This means that it can explain a lot, but the beauty of it is that it's very simple, and we can all connect to the theory itself. So what does self-determination theory say? Well, it says that we all human beings have three basic psychological needs, and these are autonomy, belonging, and competence. And when these three needs are satisfied, so when you actually have these three needs satisfied, then you are very likely to have very positive motivational outcomes. You feel fulfilled, you're engaged in your work, you relate and you identify to your team, you want to continue and persevere, you trust people around you, and you are energetic, you are mentally healthy. So these three basic needs actually mediate these outcomes. So here we're interested in volunteer management, and volunteer supervision. And self-determination theory is also a theory on leadership. And it says that good leadership, or good management, is leadership and management that allows the people in the team, in the organization, to have their needs satisfied. So a leader who supports and encourages autonomy will obviously have more autonomous members of her team. In the same way, in teams where team members support each other, people have an increased sense of belonging. And when people are appreciated for efforts or recognized, as one person put it, well, people feel competent. So that, in a nutshell, is self-determination theory. And we have built the Moti system around these three blocks. So Moti measures motivational outcomes. It measures the degree to which people's needs for autonomy, belonging, and competence are met. And it also measures the leadership skills of the supervisor. So we'll have a second poll here. We'll try to focus now on these three needs, and we will ask you how you feel that those three needs are satisfied in the Red Cross Red Crescent. Whether you're a volunteer or staff, it really makes no difference. So I'll stop sharing my screen, and Salam will.
And Salam will. Salam, did you introduce yourself? I have a doubt.
Yes, he did. He did.
Yes, okay.
Yes.
So we'll move on with the. Sorry, it's late. Huh? We're moving with the second questions. So you will have on a poll. So you have those three basic needs, and you should say on a scale from 1, very low, to 5, very high, how strong is your sense of autonomy? We'll start with autonomy, and you should put what you think for autonomy, the same for belongingness, And the last one will be competence. Wow. We wait a bit. So we're lacking autonomy, I think. Do we have more staff or volunteers? I'm curious. Could you perhaps mention in the chat or in the chat if you are staff of a volunteer? Would be interesting to see. Staff, yeah. The staff, they have less usually. Staff, well, it's quite mixed. It's still moving, so I wait a bit. I replied as a volunteer, it's a good one. Staff. Okay, so I think it's quite fixed. So we will compare with another meeting we had in Spain, the volunteering learning program that we had, and we created also this comparison. I mean, we could compare the results. Perhaps we could move to the slide of Gabrielle, if it would be possible. We had 3.3 for belonging and competence, and 3.1. So we're a bit lower. I mean, really low. A lot lower, actually. In autonomy, in the VLP, we had 4.4, and here we have 3.1. In the belonging, I don't know, it's not written. It should be something like, Gabrielle, can you help me?
Yes, but my computer is not helping me.
What do you want?
We have is the next slide. Yeah, it's 4.1,
Here.
and competence is 4.4. So we really lower. So 3.1 for autonomy, 3.3 for belonging, and 3.3 for competence we had. So we really lower than actually what we had in the Philippines, Spain. And actually, what you saw is the dashboard of Moti.
So I think I'll take from here. That was an exercise, and it was an interesting one because if our sense of autonomy and belonging and competence are low, it's not likely that we're as motivated as we could be and as energetic. So we compared ourselves to the VLP group who took the same survey, and by some kind of fluke, that group had precisely 50-50 male-female. And so as I will present to you some results of Moti, and I will present them simultaneously with the gender differences in these results. So I've extracted from Moti the dimensions, the variables for which we did have major differences between men and women in that group. It was on well-being. And so what we call well-being is the energy levels that we have. It's whether we're frustrated or not. It's whether we're emotionally drained or not, and whether we have energy or not. So that is really the physical aspects of motivation, the thing that allows us to move and get things done. And so here you see a slight difference between the men and the women. Women are slightly less energetic than the men by only 0.1. These are Likert scales. So what you did is when you answered the questions on a scale of 1 to 5, it was a Likert scale. So here the average is, if it's 3.8, the minimum is 1 and the maximum is 5. Now autonomy, it was of the three needs, autonomy is where we had a difference between the men and the women. and it's a difference of 0.2. And where it gets really interesting is that we see that we have very large differences for the supervisor's leadership skills. So in a way, this is an illustration of the theory that I just presented a few minutes ago, is that it is the supervisor's leadership skills, and here it's about listening, understanding, and encouraging, that affect the most the three psychological needs of the team members. And in this case, autonomy is particularly affected in these gender differences. And as you can see, women in this group are much less, they feel less listened to than the men, they feel less understood than the men, and they feel less encouraged than the men. So, we are in a period in history where we're very sensitive to gender differences, and here Moti is actually capturing them. But it can go the other way. And here's another example, data captured by Moti. This is in a small national society, also in 2022. And here we also saw very big differences between male and female volunteers. Well-being was lower among the men than the women. The sense of fulfillment was higher among the men than the women. But the values, and here values is how we share values with the team. It's a proxy for trust. Values was lower, much lower for the men than for the women. And so if we look at these three fundamental needs, these needs that motivate us intrinsically, we see that men felt less autonomous and less a sense of belonging, even though, men being men, they felt more competent. And now again, we look at the leadership skills, and we see that the differences are even greater when we look at the leadership skills. Men felt less listened to than the women. Men felt less understood than the women, and men felt less encouraged than the women. So this is interesting. These are the two teams where we had enough data to compare men and women, and they give opposite results. But in both cases, we see that we do have differences between men and women.
Gabriel, may I interrupt you? We have a question.
Yes.
From Canadian Red Cross, Ilya Ormel. Were there also an association between the percentage of men and women in the national societies?
So no. So the first case, the VLP is a group of volunteer coordinators that come from different national societies. So it's just a group. So we can't draw any conclusions about their national societies. In the second case, it's a small national society, and the people were selected not randomly. They were not randomly selected. So these, and this is a very important point, so thanks for asking the question. These are not representative samples. So we're not drawing conclusions for a national society or for the whole planet Earth or for the Red Cross movement. We're drawing conclusions for the teams themselves. So in this particular example, this is a team from a small national society, and this reflects the team's situation and not the situation necessarily of the national society. So Moti is a survey tool for teams, and there's no sampling. You have a team of 10 people, 10 people take the survey, those results represent only the people in the team. These are not random samples, so we cannot infer, we cannot make any conclusions over a wider population. So nevertheless, it still helps us understand how motivation and leadership work together. So these two examples, well, as I said, suggest that you can have gender differences, but that they can go either way, that the supervisor's soft skills, are appreciated and reported differently by sex. And one reason might be, and it's certainly not the only reason, is that men and women might have different expectations when it comes to being heard or being understood or being encouraged. And this is also true for staff. So here on the right, you have the Moti dashboards for staff. in that same National Society where you had the volunteers. So this is also an opportunity to show you the graphics, some of the graphics of the Moti app. So we looked statically, we looked at and compared scores and results. But because our data, because Moti is based on a theory that makes assumptions about causality, we can have a more dynamic view of how all this works. And this is important because our objective is to improve volunteer motivation. We want to improve outcomes, but to do that, we need to improve the causes of these outcomes. And so that is, again, leadership practice, which you see here. So here we have an example, which we've noticed in a number of national societies, and including in the Secretariat, by the way, of a vicious cycle that starts with people who have high engagement, who are highly engaged, but who have low autonomy, which seems to be the case with many of you, according to the poll, and a deep sense of frustration that their efforts are thwarted by the bureaucracy, by rules, by regulations, by leadership that's not taking decisions, God knows what. And when that happens repeatedly, we get some emotional drain or burnout. So our energy levels decrease, our well-being decreases, we don't feel as fulfilled. And here there's a predicament. People have two options. Either they continue to be highly engaged and they continue to be frustrated and they become workaholics, and then they burn out really for real. Another option in this situation is to actually start detaching yourself from the work and tell you it's a job after all. So why should I, waste my health and my life on this stupid job where nobody recognizes my efforts and all that? And that's when you have disengaged volunteers or disengaged staff. So this is self-determination theory shedding the light on some of the phenomenon that we've noticed with Moti data in a dozen national societies and the Secretariat with both staff and volunteers.
I think we have to move again to the Mentimeter.
And I will do that because I'm stuck anyway with my slides.
Oh, do you want to move on?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Okay.
So the question is about, does this finding apply to your experience as a volunteer or an employee, whatever you are? On my side, I can tell that I am experiencing it right now. So if I would do the Mentimeter, I would agree. So how does it look like? Absolutely. One answer so far. Definitely, for sure. So I think we have something about the Red Cross and Red Crescent. 3 answers. I'm sure you can do better. Nobody wants to share? Yes, 100%. Witnessed with the option daily with my colleagues, of course. Okay. Yes, it resonates. It does. Yes, I burn out before I relate. Yes. Okay. So I think we have something about the Red Cross and the high level of engagement. Mais bien sûr. Okay. I think we can move on again. I see volunteers leaving for this reason. Lack of experience in leadership means leaders can micromanage and take autonomy away from volunteers.
Yeah,
for sure. And not only from volunteers, but also for staff. Yes. Salam. Yes, especially when there is a strong emotional connection with the idea of the Red Cross that help others. Exactly. Okay. I think this is really, I mean, perhaps it could be in other NGOs the same way. Perhaps it's not only specific to the Red Cross, but it is something we saw. I think we can move on with the slide again, Gabrielle.
Yes, and Salam, if you just keep on moving the slides for me, because I have a problem with my keyboard.
Yes.
So thanks for that. So that was a vicious cycle, and so there's good news with self-determination theory, and that is that we can have also virtuous cycles. And so if you look again at autonomy, so everything that you've said is about autonomy and maybe a relatedness, but autonomy of not being able to being micromanaged and all that. So here, let's look at belonging and autonomy, and imagine now that leadership improves and that you have empathetic, listening, caring supervisors, and they build a sense of belonging, of relatedness to the Red Cross, that they stop micromanaging, but on the contrary, that they actually nurture people's autonomy and empower the volunteers. And that at the same time, they move away some of the bureaucratic obstacles to success. Well, you would have less frustration, less emotional drain, you would have an increase in well-being, the volunteers would be more fulfilled, and they would actually sustain or even increase their engagement because it brings them satisfaction, because all this then has a meaning for them. So when there's a vicious cycle, there can be a virtuous cycle. But as you've noted yourselves, I think, that depends on leadership. And when I say leadership, it's not just the Secretary Generals, it's everybody's leadership skills. Within the teams, obviously the supervisor needs to nurture the autonomy of the people in the team. But the team members among themselves, the volunteer among themselves, they can create that sense of belonging also. So it becomes everybody's responsibility to acquire these leadership skills, to be an empathetic listener, to show you that you care, that you understand, and then to give constructive feedback, useful feedback to your peers. So that is, I think, the solution to improving motivation among volunteers and among staff. And every time we talk about volunteers, we always have volunteer coordinators who are staff who say, yeah, but if I'm not motivated, how can I possibly motivate volunteers? And that is a very good point. And that's precisely why Moti has a questionnaire for staff and has a questionnaire for volunteers, the same questions worded slightly differently, but in all national societies, staff and volunteers need to be motivated, highly engaged, and have their leadership skills developed at all levels.
Okay, so let's move on to the good, how to say, the virtual cycle. Let's ask also with the poll. Does this finding apply to your experience as a volunteer or an employee? I think it's a yes or no question, or I don't know if it's open. Salam? I don't remember.
Yes, we have the yes or no question.
Yes or no questions to
Yes.
change a little bit. Okay.
Wow.
So 8% answered. I think everybody
Yes.
agrees. Well, we didn't have an option in between. Perhaps for the next time we could think about, yeah, I'm not sure, or I don't know. But yeah. Yes, it applies, I think. So I think we can move perhaps to your conclusion, or
Yes.
I think it's the questions, no? Salam.
No. I still
Not
have
before the
something to say.
conclusion.
The conclusion. Okay.
We're gonna talk now about the national societies. How can national societies measure progress in leadership development and volunteer motivation? Moti is a monitoring tool that allow us to define measurable targets for leadership development and volunteer motivation. Also, it allows us to monitor progress over time. So by repeating the Moti survey after 6 months or after 1 year, we can anticipate volunteering issues before it's too late, and also we can reflect on the obstacles to volunteer motivation. Also, it allows us to compare and enable peer-to-peer learning and support, so we can compare results between two branches, two centers of RED in the same national societies, or maybe between two national societies, so we can compare results, what the motivation, and so on. And we can, sorry, and here we can see some insights about leadership, intrinsic needs or intrinsic motivation, and the motivation profile. In leadership, we are focusing on three main skills, or three important skills: the listening, the understanding, and the encouraging or encouragement. Moti allow us to improve volunteer motivation by developing the leadership skills of their supervisor, of the volunteer. And also it allow us to provide supervisors with direct feedback of these skills by asking volunteers about how they can rate the listening and understanding and the encouragement of their leadership or of their supervisor. And also it allows us to monitor the progress in leadership skills and volunteer motivation by repeating the same survey with the same team after 6 months or after 1 year. So this tool, it's allow us to compare and to build the leadership capacity of our team and our national society by working on the leadership skills, by working or by measuring the intrinsic motivation like autonomy, belongingness, and competency, and also by measuring different components of the motivation like well-being, values, meaning, and fulfillment, and so on. So that's it from my side. We're gonna move now to the question, I think. Yes. Before concluding what we have. Anything to add, Gabriel or Karim, before question?
No, let's have the questions.
Okay. Just a reminder that you can answer question in all IFRC language, so feel free to ask whatever you want.
So there's some questions in the chat that I can answer. So
Yes.
so self-determination theory is a theory in psychology, and in fact it's even positive psychology. That's an important point, because we forget about psychology. We're very good in finance and accounting and disaster preparedness and all that, but if we want to change and evolve, we need to pay attention to people's emotions, and therefore psychology is a discipline that we should invest in. Let's see, what else do we have?
We will publish a paper on this.
So actually, yes, we've already published 2 papers 5 years ago, where we use self-determination theory and a Moti-like approach to understand the differences between 2 branches in Uganda, and why one branch was performing very well and the other was not. And already there we saw it was the leadership style of the supervisor that made the difference. So there we have 3 papers on that. And so if you write to me, I can send you the references.
Perhaps one thing to add, we didn't show the app. It's a web-based app. We didn't show it. You saw some dashboards about it. It was not the aim. We wanted to focus on research. But of course, we will be available if you have some additional question on the app, and you will give you our contact in the end of the session, and you will be able to contact us.
Yes, and also I want to add, Karim, that it's available in 9 languages.
Yeah.
The Moti tool, it's available in 9 languages.
So
and we can add more.
We have a comment on bureaucratization. And that's a very important point, because as you might know, there's an epidemic worldwide on burnout. And a lot of it is about bureaucracy, whether it's state bureaucracy, corporate bureaucracy, NGO bureaucracy. It is really, I mean, many people are suffering from that. So debureaucratization is important, not just to be more effective. It's also important for us just to be able to do our job and to feel better. So to debureaucratize the Red Cross or Crescent is a matter of urgency, for sure. And if we're losing volunteers, it's because we have a bureaucratic approach to volunteering and not one of psychology.
We have one question from Cedric.
Yes, can you read it?
Yeah, I can speak.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay. I said, hello. I say that the presentation, I mean, is pretty much focused on Moti and on the approach of volunteers, on the frame of the RCS movement. Have you made research maybe on a more like, for example, seeing the volunteers as part of the community, and therefore maybe using, it's not really a question, but I mean, for example, as community manager, with experience as community manager, I do see, for example, how the vision, the governance, and the leadership can be used as co-ownership. And so I'm seeing the volunteers as a group rather as the individual to bring that motivation.
Okay, I'm not sure I fully understood, but what I can tell you is there's some things we did not present tonight, and it's what we call external motivators. And so external motivators is the satisfaction that you derive from your volunteering work by being recognized by your community or by your family for the work that you're doing with the Red Cross. It's also about, you know, the reward system that governance or management affords, and the benefits that you can get from volunteering, like networking or learning new skills. So these are also motivators. But the reason why we don't single them out is because these are usually being addressed because they're the obvious ones. So they might not be adequately addressed, but they are. So nationalists do, you know, have events where they give medals, and you have the T-shirts, and in fact, in that paper we published, volunteers were very motivated just by having a Red Cross T-shirt and being proud to wear that T-shirt in their community. So all these are what we call extrinsic motivators, because the motivation, you derive it from outside of yourself. Whereas the intrinsic motivators, like autonomy, belonging, and competence, are actually really belong to you. They're almost independent of the external factors. But Moti measures both of these types of motivators, and we have shown that obviously more recognition, being treated fairly by the organization is important. It's very, very important, but that will not necessarily provide you with intrinsic motivation. For that, you really need to feel autonomous, belonging, and competence to be intrinsically motivated.
I think we have a question from Karen.
Thank you very much. First of all, greetings from Honduras, Central America. I'm very interested in this topic because I have been a volunteer most of my life. And usually people don't give most people don't give credit or importance to the volunteer body. One of the things that I want to ask is, what do you guys do as a group with the findings in this research? Do you go back to the National Society, or do you make suggestions? Do you make planning, training plans? How do you get that information? Because right now I have the blessing of being here, but I'm the only Honduran.
Right.
So how do I get that information? I understood.
Good question.
Okay.
Yeah.
So first of all, yeah, that's a very good question.
But just a little bit, just for you to understand, like for the kittens in the National Society, not only the leadership position, just for a plain volunteer.
That's the aim of Moti, actually.
Got it. So that's precisely, so Moti is your tool, because you don't need anybody's permission to use Moti. Moti is action research. So the idea is not to publish. The idea is to empower teams with data, their own data, so they can address the issues that they can address at team level, and that they have enough data and evidence so that they can move it upwards to the higher level in the bureaucracy. So it's not by publishing papers that we will change the mentality of our leadership, of our senior leadership, because frankly, they don't read papers. But what we do want is to empower people, empower the volunteers, wherever they are, by giving them the theory and the data and the tools so that they can measure and they can discuss and they can take action on their own issues and improve, take responsibility and improve their motivation. Moti is free of charge. It's automatic, it's automated. And we are providing to everybody free of charge all the resources that you need, including coaching, so that you can run your Moti journey as a kitten. No problem. In fact, that is how it is designed. And then it's only when we will have enough people using Moti that we will be able to have a meta-analysis of what's going on in the whole movement. But right now, our aim with Moti is to help you use the tool, collect the data, interpret that data, take conclusions, and act upon what you have learned.
With a plan, a small plan of action.
And then if we can, and if we can come in as the federation or as the consortium of Moti users or as the volunteer alliance and say, we are seeing the same problem in Honduras, in Mexico, in Mongolia, in Papua New Guinea, and in Switzerland, especially Switzerland.
Yeah.
And we will have within the federation, at the governing board, we will have more clout. But right now, I feel personally that senior leadership is only paying lip service to volunteer motivation because they don't know about self-determination theory. And they don't have the data to take the real decisions, which is about granting people autonomy and, you know, getting rid of the bureaucracy and all these things. So Moti is also a weapon. It's not just research.
There's a question, sorry, yes. After how many weeks, months since starting date can a volunteer fill in Moti for the first time? There is no, I think the team decides when to take, and the Moti adapts to it. You can say whatever.
Yes.
It's about I just started. It's I'm volunteering for 1 year, whatever. You know, we ask those kind of questions. So,
and it could be as a baseline assessment, Karine. They can use it as a baseline assessment and evaluate after 6 months.
The team decides to do it as a monitoring tool, and then whatever the volunteer doesn't matter. I think we have a question on bureaucracy from Virginie. Have you seen it? This one, I don't know. Or perhaps Virginie, can you raise your question on bureaucracy?
Because I asked so many. Let me check.
She's alimenting the chat, I think.
It's about, yeah, go on.
I think the one about bureaucratization of our systems, Gabrielle, you answered it.
I think I did, yes.
Yeah.
It's my soapbox.
I'm fine. What were you thinking about, Karine?
I think it's killing us, and it's closely linked to autonomy, because you have to fill in this paper in order to make sure that I think it's for staff is a problem. I'm not sure it's so much a problem for volunteers. I hope not. I hope we can preserve the volunteer from this, and it's definitely not key for competence. And not belonging as well, because you're not with other when you fill in papers. So I think it's a killer.
And I think, Karine, I think we have an answer to your question, because for many different reasons, staff well-being is lower than volunteers. Now, one reason is that when a volunteer is burning out, they just stop volunteering. I mean, that's the easy solution. And whereas staff are sort of prisoner because they have to earn a living, so they stay on despite the difficulties. But also because as staff, we're way more exposed to bureaucratic absurdities and obstacles than volunteers are. And so it is, yeah. So staff in the Red Cross, you know, they might be paid, but they're not happier.
Although Gabriel, I think because big sociology work on, for example, what Crozier and Friedberg called zone d'incertitude, of this margin of freedom and autonomy that you can have, they were done in the public system or in big corporation. I'm not sure that we have, you know, a comparative with the associative field, because I think that still we have a bigger autonomy if you compare to those two sectors. So it will be very interesting to dig in a bit more, maybe.
No, absolutely. But I mean, people in the private sector are burning out at a higher rate than in the humanitarian sector. So
Yes.
that's probably the case in point. I think we only have 5 more minutes, and Salam wants to conclude.
Yes. To conclude what we have said about Moti and the motivation and the self-determination theory, national societies can improve volunteer engagement, motivation, and well-being by developing key leadership skills like understanding, encouragement, and listening. As a result, they increase their pool of volunteers and their volunteer retention also. By using Moti, national society monitor and improve the factors that contribute to volunteer and self-motivation. And in the process, they develop leadership capability at all levels of the organization. So, Moti survey data and the qualitative insights from team discussion show that the supervisor's leadership style strongly affect volunteer motivation, and also motivational factors can differ according to gender and age. And gender inclusion requires gender-sensitive supervision and management also. The motivational profile of volunteers and staff are different between volunteer and staff. There is an overall Red Crescent culture that affects volunteer and staff motivation and well-being. And here you can find some references about motivation and self-determination theory. So you can contact us using our email address to send you the presentation or the papers, the published paper and the references, and also to support you in implementing and launching the Moti initiative in your national societies with your volunteers. We are looking forward to listen from you. Anything to add, Gabrielle or Karian?
Karine?
Don't forget to fill in the evaluation form. That will be important for us. I think as mentioned, we didn't show you Moti, but we'll be happy to do it. That's usually what we are doing. We decided to focus a bit more on research to give you more insight on what we had. I think it was it's another point of view. But I have the feeling that a lot of people want to see the tool, so perhaps we should do a mix next time. But I don't know. Gabrielle, what do you think?
Well, I think you have our emails, and we're very excited about Moti, incredibly motivated and engaged. So we would be very happy to continue the conversation with any one of you, and if there's an appetite for this, we can organize a webinar and we can show you how the app works. We can send you some more references, some papers, including those that we've written.
Adding books.
And the books, and there's even a MOOC by Professor Ryan that's free of charge. I can send you the references, and so you can learn all about self-determination theory. And actually, I would tell you that self-determination theory has actually transformed me, because it is a theory of psychology that resonates with your whole life and not just work or volunteering. So, leadership skills is about becoming a better human being, not just a better staff or better volunteer. So I think with Moti, we are truly on course to prevent and alleviate human suffering, first and foremost among our own ranks. So thank you for your attention.
Salam, do you want to say something?
Nothing, no.
That's fine. Okay,
Yes.
So I think we close. Wish you a good night.
Good night, everyone.
Good night, everyone.
Region.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.